August webinar by CiC. As you'll probably know by now, I see some familiar names and faces and some new ones as well. But we're doing one of these sessions once a month, and have been doing since just about the start of the pandemic, really, just to start broaching and looking at some of the topics around mental health that might be a little bit more difficult for us to start talking about, or a little bit for us to have difficult conversations around in the workplace. Just to introduce myself, my name is Harry Key. I'm the head of global specialist services at CiC. What that means is really, first and foremost, I'm a psychotherapist. I work with individuals and with groups, and I put together our training programs, our group trauma sessions and things like that with all of our customers across the globe. Please do, as I've said, stop me with any questions throughout this. This is about you guys answering some of my questions as much as me asking some of yours, because I've been thinking about this topic ever since I decided on it for this month. I started looking at some of the news articles that were out there talking about the positivity and the pandemic coming to an end, and we were having this big Freedom Day back in July here in the UK. I know some of you are in different places all over the world, and it started making me think, as well as the positivity, what's the negativity? What are we carrying with us from the pandemic that's affected us most? And I started thinking about our moods. I've noticed certainly my mood can change quite quickly at the moment during the pandemic, whereas usually I would consider my mood to be quite stable. It changes quite easily at the moment, and that's really because of the situation we're in with the pandemic. Certainly the realities of it, you know, the death, the loss and the grief will affect our mood most likely, but also just the changes and stresses of the pandemic have caused our moods to change. I looked at lots of the different research that was going on out there, and there's some really good bits of research about mood. It turns out we're more likely to feel more tension, depression, anger, fatigue, and confusion. Doesn't that sound like a lot of fun? I want to mark at this point that the resilience that we have all showed to get here, to still be here throughout the pandemic, to still be turning up to presentations, thinking about our well-being and thinking about our mental health when we're battling against moods that are kind of telling us all the time just to give up and do nothing about it. And within this period of dramatic change and uncertainty, like I said at the beginning with my own experience, mood swings are much more likely. I'd love to hear, and please do type your answers out in the chat here. What have you all noticed about your moods during the pandemic? What have you noticed changing? Have you noticed more positivity, more negativity? Have you noticed more mood changes? Have you been feeling any of this tension, depression, anger, fatigue and confusion? Yeah, Kelly says here, very up and down. Someone said to me here privately, more anxious than ever. Yeah, I feel that one, that anxiety. Yeah. Danielle says it's been a real roller coaster. John says, agree, more sensitivity to change. Yeah, that sensitivity to change is a really interesting one. Human beings, like any animal, are sensitive to change. We don't deal very well with it all the time. We like things to be certain and known and understood. And so when you throw change in, it is likely to affect us. Yeah. Sarah said brain fog. If you've been to my other presentations, you'll know I talk about that a lot. We have this animal brain that responds in this fight or flight way to just about everything that happens to us negative. And one of those things that fight or flight brings on is this brain fog. Yeah. A lack of access to our memory, a lack of control of our emotions are really common. Lots of fatigue, Kimberly saying. Someone saying low moods are lower and last much longer. So that's a beautiful insight you've got into yourself, though, there. You've started to notice that your low moods are persisting longer than they usually do. We would expect that to happen in the pandemic. And this is where things become quite difficult when we start thinking about severe low moods and depression even. And we'll look at that in a bit more detail as we go on, because it can be hard to tell when, am I just in a low mood? Am I just having a low time of my life? Or is this a depression? Erica says the same kind of thing. The longer it goes on, the lower my mood gets. Magic saying quite stressed for no apparent reason. Beautiful. These background stresses that we can feel, but we can't do anything about. None of you, and there's a few of us here, about 250, none of us created this pandemic, yet we're all having to deal with it. Up and down on a level of anger, someone's saying here. Emma, yeah. Alicia saying more easily triggered. Yeah. these triggers, we're going to talk about them a bit later. Thanks for bringing that up, Alicia. That's an important point. Quick changes to a bad mood, much more sensitive. Days when I've just lost my mojo, Paula says. Yeah, I like that phrase, mojo. Yeah, when you don't normally have that special secret ingredient that gets you going and keeps you focused. Highs followed by crashes, people are saying here. That's a really interesting one. A general lack of joy. Yeah, the joy being taken out of life is really an interesting one at the moment, isn't it? Because are we still able to enjoy things? Are we still allowed to enjoy things? Jackie says an important one here, needing lots of silence, but also moments of acute insight and clarity about what matters to me. So some people, it seems, are taking the opportunity with the slower pace of life or the less opportunity to do things, to do some self-reflection and some self-awareness work and look at what's struggle and what's difficult for them, what they struggle with. Yeah. Dawn says, mood is lower and I'm searching for my pre-pandemic self. This is a difficult one, isn't it? The pre-pandemic version of us doesn't exist anymore. By the very fact that we have experienced the pandemic, that version doesn't exist. So is it useful to try and get that version back, or to try and create a new version of ourselves based on what we know about ourselves now and what we have experienced? Paul said an important one here, social anxiety increased. Yeah. Anxiety about the future, job securities, another pandemic coming. Yeah. And someone said here privately, I know so many people who've begun to associate their roles with the pandemic and are looking for a change in work as a result. Is this helpful? It smacks of trying to take back control. Good. I think we need to take back a little bit of control where we can. We might not have to change jobs. We might just need to move our desk from one wall in the room to another. But some sort of control, some sort of change brought on by us can help to combat the helplessness we feel when it comes to all the other change going on. It's a really good comment. Thanks for sharing that with me. And John's put something really important here, loneliness. I'm pleased that you could be honest about that, John. I feel lonely quite a lot of the time at the moment as well. I don't normally need thousands and hundreds of people in my life. I'm not, the most popular person out there. I don't have a huge group of friends, but I need more that I'm getting at the moment sometimes. Yeah, and that can really affect my mood. Human beings, remember, we're social, tribal group animals. We rely on being around other people to feel okay. So our mood is certainly affected when we're not getting the same level of social contact that we're used to. I want to thank all of you for your honesty and your openness and your bravery in sharing these things. That's what I find so valuable about these sessions. So let's move. Oh, so actually, Paul's put an important one there. My friendship base has changed. Good. Okay, so we're marking honestly and proactively what the change is. So with a changed friendship base, what do I need to do different? Is that good enough for me? Or do I need to be more active in finding other friends or developing the friendships that I do have? When you've noticed this change, it's really important that you try and put yourself back in control and think about what you can do to get the best out of that change. This is what resilience is. And again, I want to remind you all, you're all showing fantastic resilience. You're still here. That's the only resilience that's needed during a global health pandemic, is to still be here sometimes. Now we need to start thinking about the repair, about improving our moods. Matthias saying, oddly, it's given me the chance to devote more time to therapy and self-knowledge. Even when I feel rotten, I understand why better than I ever have before. That's really good. Yeah, priorities are different. Valuing the small things in life, Kay is saying, such as walking in my locality and the colours of flowers glowing in the garden. Great. So, what does this low mood feel like? This kind of generally affected mood? I think so many of you have said these things already, so we won't go into too much detail on these, but we could be feeling all of these, and this is perfectly natural. This is a mood change brought on by the pandemic. Feelings of sadness, tearfulness, emptiness, or hopelessness. Really, really common. And let me know in the chat if any of these stand out for you. Or feel free to send me a message privately if you've got a particular example of how you're feeling that might help the rest of the group. We'd all be very grateful for any of those examples, I'm sure. We might be feeling restlessness. I certainly get that some days. Some days I just don't want to do anything. I don't want to move at all. Other days I really want to get out there and do stuff, but But sometimes I hit this wall of thinking, well, what's the point? Yeah. Hopelessness, guilt, anger or irritability more than usual, that animal brain. um, Withdrawing from things I used to enjoy, avoiding talking to friends and family, changes in my sleep pattern, changing my appetite or weight, or even these thoughts about harming myself and ending my life. These are more common and more natural than we would think. I think we've got some real stigma still around thoughts around self-harm or suicide. And we forget how natural and normal they can be. Remember, we are dealing with a distinct lack of power and control over our lives. So naturally, our brain goes to trying to control the few things that we can control. Some of those being, whether we're alive or not, really. Um, Oh, wow. John said more aware of a limited time in life. Yeah, that mortality being brought to the fore is really important. Wanting to have more boundaries. Someone saying here privately, I feel like I don't know where I belong. My life changed so much through the pandemic, and now it starts to change again, and I feel completely lost. So when I start to feel like that, and I've had similar feelings as well, start looking out for kind of anchor points, or things that are the same, because we are conditioned as human beings to focus on the negative. That's how our brain is set up, is to look out for what is the worst thing happening so that we can keep ourselves safe. So you said that your life's changed so much and that you feel completely lost. Well, what hasn't changed? What has remained the same and solid? And what can you get out of that certainty that might help you for the future? Caroline saying guilt from being less active, even though I have more time to be active. I'm going to put my hand up to that one as well. But do I really have more time? I have more potential time, but I seem to be automatically spending it not doing exercise or things like that. Kate saying, I've swung from depression, suicidal feelings to peak creativity and seeing all the positives in this situation and focusing on developing myself. Yeah, those swings are real at the moment. Magic says, lack of focus. I can't really force myself to work on anything for longer like I used to. So there's a real common theme I'm hearing too, is this lack of focus and that lack of the ability to be as productive as we were. Again, bring some certainty into our day. I think that really helps. I can be much more productive. If when I woke up this morning at 6:37, whenever I got up, if someone had said to me, okay, Harry, you only need to work for 3 hours today. It has to be between 12 p.m. and 3 p.m. Go and do it. I think I'd have been just as productive as I was for today. I think sometimes having that day stretching out in front of me and no natural things to break it up, like someone tapping me on the shoulder and going out for lunch with them, or even just my commute, I think that really still is affecting me. Someone says here, I'm going to bed later than I am happy with over phone use. And then I feel so tired all day. I gained weight in the lockdown, but I'm slowly losing it now. It's good to hear that you're slowly losing it if it's affecting you. But weight gain doesn't necessarily have to be a terrible thing. I think, again, we're so conditioned to look at those things as a negative. But it could just be that we're living our life slightly differently and our body's reacting to that. As long as it's not unhealthy, I think we should also be accepting of these things. But yeah, going to bed later than I'm happy with and overusing my phone, I really recommend trying to get a place for your phones. I always show off my collection. A place for your phones where they can charge away from your bed, away from where you're trying to sleep, even just over the other side of the room, and just starting to get into that practice of disconnecting. And if you're feeling real overuse of technology, by the way, I've tested this out on both Android and iPhone. If you hold down the button on the side, it turns the phone off. It's beautiful. And the same button then turns it back on again, and there's no issues, there's no problems, nothing's broken. I'm being a bit silly here, but it's a great thing to practice. 5 minutes a day, close your laptop, turn your phones off, and just sit back. I always put my hands on my chest. I just sit back and I just think, what do I need today? And even just doing it in a contrived way to show you, my brain immediately thought, you need to get out of here. I'm not immediately going to run off, but I need to go outside today. I need to go and spend some time outside. I haven't been outside for a couple of days. Nice and simple. Someone has asked, can captions be turned on? I'm not sure. I haven't used them on WebEx before, but I will look into it for the next session. Thank you for that. I'll have a little look and see if I can do it now, but I'm not very good at looking through things and talking at the same time, so I think we might have to leave it till next time. But thank you for making me aware of that. I'll check it out. Sabrina says, sometimes I'm totally understimulated, so fidgety and distracted. Less so when work is busy. That's been a godsend. Yeah, understimulated. I don't know why that should be seen as a negative. Beautiful. It's like boredom. Why is that seen as a negative? Boredom means I'm ready for something else. Understimulated means I'm crying out for new things. I know that it's annoying, but we do have access to a lot of new things online, a lot of new information. Trying out a new hobby is a great way of beating that understimulation, because we get this fantastic sharp learning curve at the start of trying anything, where we learn a huge amount really quickly, and that releases all sorts of serotonin and endorphins that makes us feel great. So I would cherish that understimulation, cherish that boredom, and try and take advantage of it. Someone said here, could you go back to the anchor points and maybe give some examples? Really connecting to everything changing. I relocated for a job, away from family, friends, and a new chronic diagnosis during the pandemic too. Struggling with the new normal. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. So the anchor points don't necessarily have to be things or places, but it could be ideas, hobbies, dreams, ambitions. If I've still got an ambition to do a certain thing that I had before, that stayed the same. That stayed the same as me. Morals. My moral standpoint can be an anchor for me. And just thinking, well, look, much might change around me in my life and in my world. By the way, it's supposed to. Yeah. I mean, if our life stayed the same from when we were born, it would become pretty understimulating quite quickly. So I think it's important that we cherish the change, but also stick with those anchor points that don't have to be something physical. I, for instance, have always really enjoyed doing lots of active sports. I don't get a chance to do them all the time, and by that I mean, sometimes extreme and dangerous sports. But I have to encourage myself. I have to get the courage together to want to do those things and have the energy to do it. But I can use my desire to do that as an anchor point and think, okay, I'm not always going to be 24 hours a day able to go skydiving, but maybe I can do some research. Maybe I can learn about the science of it, the physics behind it. I can use that anchor point and branch out. A bit like when, remember at school, you used to do those kind of spider diagrams. You start with an idea and take branches off it. That's what I mean to use those anchor points for. Yeah. Someone said here privately, I'm putting smaller tasks off, sometimes weeks, even if it's important, just can't get started. I think that's a pretty natural human thing. I think we can all put our hands up to putting off the small things. Again, human beings aren't designed for doing small things. We're designed for life or death, big events happening, and we survive, like running away from a tiger, or, beating another tribe, or whatever it might be. We are not designed for a bill sitting on our desk and a reminder coming through once every few weeks. Our brains are not set up like that. So don't worry about that kind of stuff. I wanted to also talk what causes depression, because we're looking at these kind of things. A lot of these are the symptoms and signs of depression. And I don't want us all to go away from today thinking we're all suffering from clinical depression, because a lot of the time, and if you look here on the text in green, lockdowns, movement control orders, and other restrictions have caused a lot of us to mimic the symptoms of depression. We've all been acting as if we were a depressed person, or some of the regular signs of depression, this isolation and loneliness, rather than choosing to do it because we're depressed, or having to do it because we're depressed and it's the only thing that feels safe. We've been forced to do it by our governments and our local authorities. We might have been in difficult relationships, and they can be much more damaging than being alone. Anxiety can lead to depression as we start to focus on our fears. Well, we've all been told to be more anxious. We've literally been told that being around other people is dangerous. And high stress levels. I don't know many people whose job or career hasn't become more stressful due to the pandemic, either because they couldn't do their job as they normally would, or because of the change, or even just because you're stuck doing it alone and that feels more stressful. Ola says in the chat here, my concentration span has reduced in the last 1 year or so. Frustrating. I think we need more of that certainty when it comes to our concentration span. I need to know how long you want me to concentrate for. If you're asking me to roll out of bed at 7 in the morning and sit at my desk from 7:15 till 7:15 at night, I'm probably going to have a tough time focusing and concentrating. I need boundaries. I need little rules within that. So yeah, this causing of depression, really, really key. I can see a lot of questions and comments coming through around attention span. Maybe because I've picked up a couple of those questions. Maybe it's because that's what I'm feeling too. But yeah, it's a real common theme coming out. I think many of us might be reaching the end of our ability to do the same stuff over and over and over again. Yeah. So I also wanted to give across some information about what happens that helps a low mood persist. I'm talking here about depression clinically. I'm talking here about a very small low mood that's lasting half a day. I'm talking about everything in between. These are the things that I know really contribute to a low mood. Um, but I'm going to answer a couple of questions from chat before I get into this. So Georgia said, what's the difference between depression and mimicking depression? I think that's the issue. I think sometimes it's hard to tell. I think for those of us listening here that have suffered from depression before, we might start to slip back into those habits. When we pick up 2 or 3 of these, we might slip back into the other behaviors of our depression because it's so similar. And for those of us that haven't suffered or experienced a significant depression before, we might be worried. We might be thinking, okay, is this what life's like now? Do I just live like this forever? So I think the difficulty is that it is hard to tell, and it will be individual for each of us as to whether we're actually depressed or whether we're just feeling a depression. Someone else has said here privately, I feel trapped in a relationship as their care provider, becoming resentful as I have no escape. You need somewhere to talk about that. It's really tough to be going through that situation. Being trapped in a relationship, first and foremost, is really tough. And secondly, being in that because you're someone's care provider is even more difficult. So make sure that you've got a good network of friends and family around you that you can talk to honestly about how you feel about this relationship. Otherwise, have a look online at some of the support groups out there for carers, but also the support groups for people trying to leave a relationship. Us at CiC, if we're your employee assistance program, we'll be able to help you find some of those groups as well. Paul said here, it's like the volume control has been turned up on my ND conditions. Yeah, I think any pre-existing condition we had, be it mental or physical, is likely to have been exacerbated during the pandemic. Yeah. And George says, context, social isolation is known to cause issues and is a punishment in prisons. Yeah, it's one of the things that we need for survival, right? We can go 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food, and 3 months without social contact before basically giving up on survival. Cool. Thank you for those, and keep the questions and comments coming. So a low mood is more likely to persist when I don't challenge unbalanced thought processes. So if all I can see is the negative, if all I can predict is the worst possible outcome, then I'm likely to stay in that low mood. So have a little think about, maybe just take today, for example. How much negative thought have you been able to have, and how much positive thought have you been able to have? If it's been overly positive, maybe try and see some of the negative realities, because the balance is important either way. But certainly, if you've noticed your thoughts being almost wholly negative about everything that you're doing, there's a frustration, an anger, a sadness, a fear, a reluctance going on there, then also try and see the opposite. Try and see if you can find some balance in your thought there. Because, like I say, we're not going to try and force ourselves out of anything here, but we can look at the realities of situations, or we can look at the unrealities of situations, right? I know when I'm anxious, I might feel like the reality is everything's terrible. I might as well die because everyone's going to die. I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to fight with everyone that I love. I'm going to end up alone. And then all of a sudden, my brain has to start thinking of the actual reality. Well, I'm sitting in my bedroom. No one's trying to kill me right now. I haven't, thank you, caught coronavirus yet. I don't think I'm going to catch it in my room that no one's been in for 18 months. So I can relax that mind a little bit that's trying to panic and trying to find the worst. John said here, do you think people use the label anxiety as a cop-out for working on their own resilience? No. I think some people can use and abuse definitions and diagnoses and words. just like some people out there could lie about having a physical medical condition. I don't think that the issue there is what condition someone chooses. I think the issue is that someone needs support, whether they have a condition or whether they're telling people they have one and they don't. It doesn't make a difference to me personally. I'd rather someone gets some help, whether they have to make up one thing to get the help that they need, or make up another. I think it's, yeah, if I'm struggling, it doesn't matter whether I'm stressed, anxious, or depressed. It just matters that I get someone to talk to and listen to. Again, shouldn't be a surprise coming from a therapist. I do think talking about things is a good start, but human beings don't solve problems by going over and over them in our head. We're not computers. We need some sort of reflective practice usually. Kate's replied saying, would that be a cop-out or a valid reason? Can be anxious that not able to complete the required roles of a job, for example. Yeah, I do kind of see what you mean here, John. If people just say, oh, well, I don't have to do anything about that, that's my anxiety. But I don't think that's people using the anxiety as a cop-out. I think that's just people not being ready to deal with it yet. I've certainly had medical conditions, physical, mental, emotional, that I've just not been ready to deal with. I hurt my toe on holiday a couple of weeks ago. It's not bad enough for me to do anything about yet. If it starts, falling off and turning orange, maybe I'll do something about it. And we do the same with our mental health, right? We have a couple of stressful days and we just think, oh, I'll bash back a couple of glasses of wine and I'll get through it tomorrow and maybe it'll get better. And then we leave it and leave it and leave it till it gets bad enough for us to do something about it. It's just the same as that bill sitting on the kitchen table, right? It's not like we're never going to do anything about it. We just haven't done anything about it yet. Lee says, what about if we see these signs in others? What is the suggested course of action? I say be honest. I use the word notice a lot as a therapist, but also as a friend and a colleague. Just say, I notice that you don't seem to be enjoying things that you're doing at the moment. Do you want to have a chat? Do you want to talk about it at all? Just something like that. Just noticing and then an offer of a conversation, I think, is all that's necessary. Be aware that just because someone turns down your offer of support doesn't mean that they don't need it or don't want it. It just means they can't take it at the moment. I think that's a really important one to remember. The time in which we most need support as a human being is when we're least equipped to find it and receive it. So we can be really tricky. You could try 5 or 6 times and we push you away like you're the worst person in the world. Unfortunately, you're exactly what we need, but we just can't take it right now. So it needs a little bit of persistence, unfortunately. Yeah. So daily activities being unbalanced or out of order is one of those things that helps our low mood persist. Not including joyful activities in my routine, not including any activities that give us purpose and a sense of achievement. Avoiding things we should be doing helps the low mood persist. You'd be surprised. I keep using that example because I genuinely do have a bill on my kitchen table next door that's on my mind. I know it'll take me 10 minutes to sort that out. I know I have the money to pay it, and I should have paid it 2 weeks ago when they sent the first reminder. Something stubborn in me is not letting me do it. But if I go and do it, I'll feel an immediate hit of relief and serotonin and control and power, and I'll feel more positive about my life. If I could tell you exactly what's stopping me from doing it right now, I think I wouldn't be in this position. I think I'd be some sort of guru or philosopher, but there is something that stops us. I haven't quite put my finger on what it is yet. Unhelpful coping strategies. I mentioned that a second ago. Drinking more alcohol, overeating, sleeping too much, and then feeling alone and not talking about how you feel. Really important here, I think. Are you doing any of these on a daily basis? Let me know in the chat which of these you're feeling. I'm just going to look at the chat for a second, see if there's any questions I can pick out. I think most people with anxiety want to do something about it, but yes, you need to be ready. Yeah, I think you're right there, Kelly. By the way, most people with anxiety, as all of us, anxiety is a natural human animal response. It's unavoidable and totally normal. It's when it becomes a problem for us that we get an anxiety disorder, when we can't regulate it, when we can't do anything about it. So yeah, I think most people with anxiety issues probably want to do something about it. It's uncomfortable, it's painful, and it's very lonely at times, especially when people don't quite understand it. Andrew says here, males still see talking about issues as a sign of weakness. And Kate replies, some women too. Yeah, I think there's still stigma around mental health. I think we always have to be careful when we're talking about mental health that, we are trying to break down barriers and break down stigma, but every time we try and do that, there's often a bit of a pushback internally and externally from the world. So, it, the fight for mental health parity with physical health is not an ongoing upwards trajectory. It will take some hits. Like at the start of the pandemic, for the first month of it, I wasn't really caring about my mental health, to be honest with you. As a mental health professional, I didn't even think about my mental health. I was way more concerned about my physical health. Just like if I, suddenly woke up in the middle of a street, I'd be more interested in getting myself out of the road than, thinking about what childhood trauma had led to my bad dreams that started me sleepwalking into the roads, right? Sometimes things are more important to us than our mental health, and that's okay. Absolutely natural. Someone said here privately, I find I end up going to bed just to rest, and I end up spending my evenings in bed, and then I've wasted my evening but didn't do anything about it. So let's go back to that idea of balanced thoughts. Okay, so you can rest in bed. Good. You know exactly where you need to go when you need rest. That's fantastic. So I try and put in my diary 2 or 3 check-in points during the day where I'm going to check in on my energy levels and think, do I need half an hour in bed or do I need half an hour walking around the block? Have I got energy and should I use it? Or am I lacking energy and do I need to find it? Because if I find that when I do have energy, I use it, my body then responds and produces energy at the right times for me. So I think that might be really useful for you. Just put those check-ins a few times a day. Hopefully that helps. Yeah. So lots of people saying not doing activities, eating and drinking too much, unbalanced thoughts and sleep, noticing projection a lot. Um, and she says here, I find if I don't have energy, I still go for a walk. I feel so much better. Yeah, we do create the energy that we're asking for in our body. Um, if I just stopped leaving the house, my mind wouldn't suddenly try and force me out there. It would just get used to it and stop producing the energy that I need to get out and go out the house. I also wanted to talk about one of the more difficult topics to broach. You can always tell it's a difficult topic because I pause to take a sip of water. It's time to make it important. Self-harm and suicidal thoughts are very natural. When things feel unbearable, when they get to the point that we can't bear the pain anymore, we think about inflicting pain on ourselves or even stopping the pain entirely by ending our lives. This often starts a way of controlling our emotions or finding relief from something uncomfortable. If I'm feeling like the whole world is out there inflicting pain on me and I'm powerless to stop it, I might want to harm myself because it makes me feel in control of that pain. The thing is, thoughts like this become powerful and intrusive when we're alone for long periods of time. This is what the big concern around self-harm and suicidal thought is during the pandemic, is that people having them aren't getting the support they'd normally get because they're not around as many people where they might mention it. It's probability, right? If I'm around 25 people a day and I'm having suicidal thoughts every day, maybe I've got a 25 in one in 25 chance of telling someone about it. But if I'm not around anyone, I've got no chance of telling anyone about it. This is a really tough thing for us to speak about as human beings. This is where real stigma is on there, particularly around self-harm. If I'm self-harming, I'm terrified about telling anyone because I don't want people to suddenly start thinking I'm going to kill myself and lock me up or, take my power away from myself. The self-harm is the only thing that's making me feel okay at the moment. So I don't share it with people as a problem because I don't want them to try and take that problem away. It isn't a problem. So I always recommend just having nice, open conversations around this where possible. If you're someone at your workplace that people do naturally come and speak to you about their issues, maybe just say at one meeting, just saying, look, if you're having these thoughts of self-harm or suicide, come and talk to me. I'm not going to send you anywhere else. I'm not going to rush you to hospital. I'm not going to call the police. I'm going to listen to you. That's what people need to hear around this kind of thing, that they'll be listened to and understood. What I do know for any of those listening that are being bothered by these thoughts, if self-harm or suicidal thoughts or actions are bothering you every day, that's a really good sign that it's time to speak to a professional about it. Professional mental health professionals will understand this and will listen and talk to you. The only time we get concerned and we start thinking about risk and breaking confidentiality is when we're really concerned for your health and safety today, when you're talking about harming yourself to a point that you're not in control, or when you're talking about ending your life in a particular way at a particular time. That's when we'll start saying to you, hey, that's concerning. Let's get you into some further support. So just have a think about starting a conversation around this if you're feeling it, because the sooner you talk about it, the sooner someone can listen. Hopefully that helps. So someone's asked a few questions in chat. Jackie said, do you have any tips for alternatives to how are you? It seems like a really triggering question. Yeah, it can be triggering for people. It's also, I've been asked how are you by people that don't give a crap how I am most of my life. So it's just become one of those phrases we might as well be saying hi or hey, how you doing? It's the same kind of thing. So I think I like to ask different questions to different people. I like to ask a little bit about them. If I know that they've had a weekend with their family, I'll say, how was the weekend with your family? If I know that they've had a weekend on their own, I'll say, how was your weekend on your own? I just think trying to ask the same question all the time is difficult. So yeah, just try and vary things. I might not respond to one of the questions that you asked me about how I'm getting on, but the second one might be, how are you getting on is quite a good one, actually. How are you getting on? Or if you can be specific, brilliant. Just say that, I've noticed that I felt quite alone with my work now I've been doing it all at home. How have you felt? Just giving people a little bit of a prompt. John said, are we going to cover what we can all do proactively? Yes. Yeah, I'm going to look at a couple of those things in a minute, actually. Good question. Rob says, I find CBT to be the mental health equivalent of paracetamol. It's helpful and useful for clearing up low-grade issues, but when I faced extremes of low mood, it's just not a powerful enough tool. I think like medication, talking therapies are different and will suit different people. Different styles will suit different people. I will be a useful and effective therapist to how many people are 265 people here? I might be useful and effective to 20 or so people, maybe about 10% of the people listening here. Not because of the type of therapy I use, but because I'm a human being. And some people just won't get on with the way I look, the way I sound, the way I talk. It's as much about the relationship as anything, I think, as well. So Joyce said, at what point does being someone who receives these thoughts supposed to say no? I'm a go-to person when it comes to people to talk about suicidal thoughts, but at some point it becomes overwhelming and draining emotionally. How do we cut off the people without hurting them? I wouldn't cut them off. I wouldn't think of cutting them off. I'd think about getting them into the right kind of support. If you've reached your limit of how many conversations you can have about this, your boundary is the most important thing at that point. So if someone else comes to you and starts talking about it, I'd be really honest. And I'd say, I'm really pleased that you felt able to come and talk to me about this. A lot of people seem to feel just as comfortable. I'm really pleased for it. Why don't we have a look at all the different places you could go to have a chat about this, and I'll introduce you to them. And then start looking at, if it's at work, your employee assistance program or HR, or just encouraging them to go speak to their doctor or something. Just because someone has come to you does not mean you need to be the person to give the support, but you can be really effective at signposting them to support. That's what I'd recommend. Someone doesn't need you to be available 24 hours a day to help them. They just need reliability. And if they can go to you and reliably get guided to the right place, that'll be really useful. I just also wanted to bring in a reminder of what burnout looks like, because burnout has a lot of these similar signs, right, with the high stress we're dealing with. So always be checking in with at the moment what your energy levels are. And I think that'll be really helpful. Someone said here to me privately, and I just want to answer it. My teenage child started self-harming since lockdown. How can I support them? Talk to them. Tell them what you've noticed. I don't know whether they've started self-harming and they've told you about that. And so that's how you know, but maybe you've noticed some signs. So first of all, if you've only noticed some signs and you think they're self-harming, it's always good to check. Just say, I've noticed this and I'm wondering if you've been harming yourself. It's okay if you have. I'd love to just talk to you about it if you feel comfortable. That's how I'd start the conversation. If they've already told you about it and already spoken about it, I would just regularly check in with them and say, hey, I was just thinking about you and how you're doing today. Are you getting all the support you need at the moment? Can I do any more, or can I put you in touch with anyone? Just keep it nice and simple, nice and gentle like that. Just always be checking in with the support they have. Kate said, what's on top for you today? Ah, that's nice. Yeah, that is a nice one. Lots of people are enjoying that one. Good. What can we do? Well, we can respond to things a bit more resiliently. I think when more change comes our way, difficult situations, yeah, maybe a job change, maybe a life change, maybe an environment change, they can arise when we least expect them. That's what's the most difficult about some of these things. Normally, our behavioral responses are these kind of regressed stress responses, right? We get defensive, aggressive, or ignorant, fight, flight, and freeze. Right? So a resilient response to most situations has to involve something really important called pausing. We need to get out of doing this reflex, knee-jerk animal reactions to stuff. When we're hit with change, when you open that letter, it does look like a bill you weren't expecting. Don't try and read the whole thing at once. Put it down for a minute. Check on your breathing. Check your brain is engaged. Because so often you're doing these stressful, difficult things, and the adrenaline and cortisol that you're hit with in that stressful situation is basically shutting your brain off. Your modern brain is gone. You're just in your animal brain. So you don't have access to your memory. You don't have control of your emotions. You're just being hit by the full force of it. So when you're hit by the full force of something, be it change, a bit of information, a big fear happening, something like that, try and give yourself pause. And I wish this pathway rhymed or had a useful, whatever those things used to be called, you used to do them at school, acrostics. Pause, accept, confer, and respond. It's my favorite way to do things. Pause. I don't want reflex reactions. I'm a grown adult human being of the modern era. I don't need to fight or run away from this. I need to deal with it. So I accept it. I can't change what's happened. I can't change the fact that this letter is in front of me telling me something terrible. So I must accept the reality of it and then confer. I don't know why we try and do these things so often on our own as human beings. Again, we're built as societal group animals. We just need to be with other people sometimes. Even if it's strangers online. Go online on a forum, talk to people about it. Speak to yourself in your bedroom. Draw a picture of how it makes you feel. Paint, sing, dance, something. Just don't try and sort it all out up here, because it doesn't always go very well. And then we can respond with care. It diffuses the situation. It disengages us from these regressed responses. When I talk about resilience, this is what I mean. By resilience, I mean pausing, stopping, slowing down. It reminds me to slow down a little bit. I start panicking when I've got about 15 minutes left and wondering if I'm going to have enough time to go over everything. I also do want to talk to you a little bit about human vulnerability. I think when change or uncertainty or stressful situations come and it hits us right in one of our vulnerabilities, it's much more difficult for us to deal with. Now, we all will have different triggers of things that will challenge us, but usually anything that's related to a traumatic or difficult experience we've had in the past is going to be more difficult for us to deal with. So let's say, for instance, as a therapist, a new client comes to me and they have just been, I don't know, in a terrifying car crash, and I was in a terrifying car accident when I was a kid. That's not the right client for me. If I haven't perfectly dealt with every emotion and memory and hangover and every bit of psychological wound left from my experience, I'm not going to be effectively able to support this person. I need to know those vulnerabilities for the safety of others and for the safety of myself. I don't need you all to, type these out in the chat or go and tell other people about them, but just be aware, because knowing my vulnerabilities really does help. Because if I know that that's a vulnerability of mine, I don't feel guilty saying to that client, oh, I'd love to work with you, but I think you'd be better off with someone else. I know I'm doing the right thing. I know I'm doing the thing that's the most psychotherapeutic for that person. And I think the same goes with any walk of life. I work with a lot of media and social media companies. I work with dozens of journalists across the globe. Just because you're asked to report on a story doesn't mean you have to do it. What if it's a story that's really similar to something that you went through that was traumatic and transformative in your life? It's not going to be easy for you. It might even be impossible for you to do it and take care of yourself. Sometimes, again, this is why that pausing really helps. The other things I wanted to talk about is encouraging a positive mood. Now, some of these things might seem a bit elementary and obvious, but most well-being tips are elementary and obvious because we've got quite an obvious and elementary brain. What made you happy before all of this? Do more of it. I'd love to hear in the chat, what's the thing that made you really happy before the pandemic that you haven't been able to do? You haven't found time or space, or it hasn't felt possible? I always talk about this in presentations. Mine was fighting. I used to love going to fighting gyms and fighting other people. I think trying to be calm and relaxed and be a therapist all day, some of that aggression gets a bit pent up, and it's nice to let it out sometimes in a constructive way. Going to concerts. I'm with you there, Ali. Yeah, thank you for that one. Yeah, missing out on that. Although I saw on Instagram some of my friends were at a festival over the weekend, so we're not too far off. Someone said here privately, I said no to something this week that I knew was a vulnerability for me, but I'm still reeling with guilt and anxiety about it over 24 hours a day. If I had a magic guilt spray, I would give it to you, but I don't. It doesn't exist. You've protected yourself and looked after yourself, and that's the most important thing. That's always the best for us and for other people. We don't need heroes. We've got enough of those, and they happen in the times that we really need them. What we need is people to still be around. We need resilience. So hopefully the guilt will ease at some point. But it's natural that you feel that guilt, of course. Most of us have been trained all of our lives to be good and accepting and say yes and do what's asked of us, especially when it comes from people of authority. And that's a problem, a different problem of itself. But for today, just think about how you've done well to stand up to that authority and look after yourself. And it leads to people respecting you, by the way, properly respecting you, that you have boundaries. We don't actually want people to say yes to us all the time. We need people to say no to us. It gives other people opportunities as well. Traveling and gigs, holidays abroad, being able to socialize, music, seeing my nieces and nephew, travel. I've been on small UK trips now, which has been lovely. Good. That positivity, balance of thought. You guys are practicing it already. Playing golf, long walk followed by a pub lunch or theatre. That sounds great. I love going for poetry events. I struggle with motivation, someone said here. How do I force myself to get up and do? Sometimes I want to do something and have the time and opportunity, but my brain and body feel like lead. Just start small. Don't expect yourself to start something and complete it. I think that's sometimes what gets our brain in a mix. It's just thinking, well, I've got the energy to get up and go and get my golf clubs, but what about when I'm on hole night? It doesn't matter. Go get your golf clubs, look at them, hold them, feel them, touch them, actually start doing the thing, and the energy might generate or it might not. You might need to go back and lay back down again. That's okay too. Don't judge yourself so harshly, I think is the key to those kind of things. Most of the stuff that we do in life, if we fail, it's no big deal. We're just scared of failure overall because we're scared of death, and death is the ultimate failure. But honestly, most of the stuff that we do isn't life or death. I think we just need to take some of the fear out of it. Hopefully that helps. Yeah, start small. Start the day with something just for you. It's never easier later on in the day to find well-being if you can start the day with something for you. Even if it's just 5 minutes of no computers, no screens, no phones, having your coffee staring out the window. It's a really good way to start the day. Taking on creative tasks, we've talked about this already, and just you're allowed to enjoy things. Really able to enjoy things. It's a pandemic, it's horrible. Millions of people are dying. You can still enjoy your life. You're allowed to. It's so often that we find that when we're about to enjoy something, we start comparing ourselves to others. Thinking about all the poor people all across the world suffering more than us. Okay, but does me not enjoying myself help those other people? Does me limiting myself help other people live a better life? No, actually, probably me enjoying myself and getting more out of life will help me have more energy and time for others. I'd love to hear in the chat the things you've done to create a positive mood for yourself during the pandemic. We're just about to finish, and we'll have plenty of time for questions. I'm going to turn off the recording in a second, but just a brief reminder for those of you that do get your support from CiC, have a look at wellonline.co.uk. You'll need a login and password, but your HR department should be able to help with that. If you have any questions, get in touch with us at assist@cicwellbeing.com. Now it's time for our open Q&A. For those of you watching on YouTube on the recording, I'm about to stop that, so goodbye and thank you again for listening.